In this problem, you've been asked to solve for y in the equation that looks like this. If you're going to read this in English words, it would say the absolute value of 4y minus 7 is equal to 5. So we want to find the values of y that make this expression true. Now before you get started with this, you have to be careful about something here, in particular about the absolute value here. And if you remember something about absolute value, let's just take a very simple example. Say the absolute value of x is equal to 7. You have to think a bit about what it means to have the absolute value signs around this variable here. And in this case here, remember that the answers to this easier equation here are that x are equal to 7 and x equals to minus 7. Because if I put 7 into the absolute value signs here, I'll get the absolute value of 7, which is equal to 7. That's a true statement. If I put a minus 7 in for x, I get the absolute value of minus 7, and the absolute value of minus 7 is also 7. So that's another solution to the equation. So you have to think a bit about these things here, how the absolute value works, before you just dive in and start solving for y here. So in particular, what could happen over here is as long as 4y minus 7, this quantity here that's inside of the absolute value sign, if that comes out to be 5, that'll definitely solve the expression here, because I'll have the absolute value of 5 is equal to 5, and that's true. But 4y minus 7 could also be negative 5. Because if 4y minus 7 somehow came out to be negative 5, then we took the absolute value of minus 5, I would get a 5 once again. So that's what I mean by you have to be a little bit careful when you see the absolute value signs here. Often there are two solutions to these equations here. So let's go ahead and solve it. I think we have the logic down now. So in order to solve this here, I hope you agree that if 4y minus 7 is equal to 5, that would solve this absolute value equation here. But also, 4y minus 7 could be negative 5 as well. Either one of these would solve this absolute value equation up here. So if we go ahead, let's just go ahead and solve these then for their respective values here. If I start with this one right here, let's see, 4y, I'll move the minus 7 over and get 12 for this. So y comes out to be 3. This would be one of my solutions to the equation here. And we'll plug it in. I'll show you how it works in just a second here. But now if I go and solve this one here, I'll get 4y, and if I move the minus 7 over, I'll get negative 5 plus 7 is equal to 2. Or y just comes out to be 2/4, which is 1/2. So the correct answers to this equation up here, the absolute value of 4y minus 7 is equal to 5. There are two solutions. Y can be 3, or y could be 1/2. These are the two correct solutions to this equation here. But before we close here, let me just talk about it a bit more. Let's plug in the values and see what we get here. So suppose I plug y is equal to 3 in for this here. I would get the absolute value of 4 times 3 minus 7 equals to 5. So I'm closing the absolute value sign there. Well, what is 4 times 3 minus 7 is equal to 5? So would you agree then that the absolute value of 5 is equal to 5? Yeah, I think so. That means it's a true equation there. We've solved it properly. How about the 1/2? Here's the absolute value of 4 times 1/2 minus 7 is equal to 5. That could be the second check right there. So what's 4 times 1/2? Well, 4 times 1/2 is 2, so I'm going to get 2 minus 7 is equal to 5. And this is the case here where the absolute value sort of kicks in its unique property here. 2 minus 7 is minus 5, but remember we have absolute value signs around it. So we have a minus 5, the absolute value of minus 5 is equal to 5. Here's the minus 5 that came from the 2 minus 7, but remember it's an absolute value sign, and the absolute value of minus 5 is 5. So this also checks in the equation here. And hopefully with this last example right here, you can see why you have to be a bit careful, because the negative signs, the negative solutions, also count in these absolute value inequalities. So finally, the solution to your problem here is y is 3 or 1/2, and hopefully you can gain a bit of insight by plugging in here and seeing how it all works.